Sarah stood beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor, her scrubs wrinkled, shoes worn thin from miles of hurried steps. She was only 32, but the weight on her shoulders aged her in quiet ways. Deep lines beneath tired eyes, soft sighs that lingered in empty break rooms. A single mother to a 7-year-old boy with asthma, Sarah had grown used to sacrifice. Sleep came in stolen minutes. Meals were often granola bars in her locker. And still she showed up, every shift, every patient, every moment, with a gentleness that couldn't be taught. By day, she was a nurse in the ER of a crowded public hospital in New York City. The chaos was relentless. Sirens, stretchers, screaming families, codes called out like prayers. But Sarah never rushed a patient's pain. She knelt at bedsides, held trembling hands, adjusted pillows with care. To her, each person wasn't just a chart or diagnosis. They were someone's mother, father, child. And in that, she saw herself. By night, she transformed into a student again, attending evening classes in pursuit of her advanced nursing degree. The dream was simple: provide a better life for her son Nathan. She wanted to breathe a little easier, to afford the right medications without juggling bills, to one day own a home where her boy could have his own room, and not just a corner in their cramped studio apartment. But dreams cost money, and money was what she didn't have. Just last week, her application for financial aid had been denied. The tuition deadline loomed, and her bank account barely held enough for groceries. She didn't tell anyone. Not her coworkers, not her professors. Certainly not Nathan, who already worried too much for a child. Instead, she put on a smile, tightened her ponytail, and went back to work, because her patients needed her, and so did her son. Most days, she walked the tightrope of exhaustion, balancing between doing too much and never enough. She fought sleep while reviewing anatomy flashcards on the subway. She kept inhalers close, waking at night to check if Nathan was breathing easily. And yet, no one ever heard her complain. Her kindness was quiet, steady, like the way she folded a blanket at the foot of a gurney or whispered comfort to someone dying alone. In a world that rarely noticed, Sarah gave all she had, and then a little more. It was a cold Saturday night when Sarah arrived for her overnight shift. The wind outside howled against the glass doors of the ER, and the city felt heavier than usual, like it too had grown tired. Sarah clocked in, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as she scanned the board. Full capacity again. It didn't faze her anymore. Around 1:15 a.m., the automatic doors flew open. An EMT wheeled in a man, older, probably late 60s, with a long gray beard matted to his chest and clothes that hadn't been clean in weeks. His jacket was torn, socks soaked through, and the acrid smell of the streets clung to him like a shadow. The triage nurse glanced up, barely hiding her sigh. Got another one. Fell near Canal Street. Scraped his arm, bruised a rib. No ID, no insurance, no next of kin. A few staff members exchanged looks, then returned to their screens. The unspoken code in the room was clear: minimal effort, move him along. But Sarah didn't hesitate. "Room 4 is open," she said gently, already walking toward the stretcher. She didn't flinch when she leaned in close to help him sit up. The man winced, clutching his side. "You're safe now, sir. Let's get you cleaned up, okay?" He didn't speak. Just nodded faintly, his eyes sunken and tired. Sarah guided him into the room, pulled the curtain closed, and rolled up her sleeves. She filled a basin with warm water and gently wiped away the blood and grime from his arm. The skin beneath was weathered thin, and scarred in ways that told stories no one had bothered to ask about. She wrapped his ribs, applied ointment, and checked for any signs of head trauma. Then she tucked a warm blanket over him and placed a bottle of water by the bedside. Still, no name. No words. But Sarah smiled as if she'd known him all her life. "You're not alone," she said softly, adjusting the blanket. "I'm right here." Others passed the room, some raising an eyebrow at the way she lingered. But Sarah didn't care. To her, it didn't matter who he was. or who he wasn't. Every person deserved dignity. She sat by his side for a moment longer, watching as his breathing slowed, his eyes fluttering shut. It was the first real rest he'd probably had in days. Before leaving, she scribbled a note and tucked it beneath his pillow. "You matter. You're not invisible. Someone sees you." Then she dimmed the lights and returned to the hallway, ready to face the next emergency. What Sarah didn't know, what no one knew, was that in the bed beside the curtain, hidden behind a newspaper and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses, someone had been watching her closely. And he wasn't just another patient. By 3 a.m., the ER had settled into a strange kind of quiet, the kind that hums beneath flickering lights and soft monitor beeps. Sarah was running on fumes. Her legs ached, and her eyelids felt like they were stitched with lead. But she didn't sit down. Not yet. She passed room 4 again and noticed the man, the nameless homeless patient, shivering under his blanket. His bandages were fresh, his wounds cleaned, but Sarah saw something else in his face. Emptiness. Like someone who'd gone too long without being looked at, truly seen. She paused at the door, then turned back toward the staff kitchen. There wasn't much there, some off-brand crackers, a few juice boxes, and a carton of milk near expiration. Sarah checked her locker. At the bottom was the insulated bag she always packed for her son. Inside was a thermos of warm milk and a peanut butter sandwich she hadn't eaten. Without hesitation, she poured the milk into a paper cup and placed it, along with the sandwich, on a tray. She added a banana from her own lunch stash and carried it back to room 4. The man was half asleep, but his eyes opened when she entered. "Didn't want you going hungry," she whispered. "Not on my watch." He blinked slowly, lips parted in confusion, as if unsure whether he was dreaming. "It's not much, but it'll help you rest better." She smiled and tucked the note she'd written earlier, "You matter. You're not invisible," beneath the plastic cup. And still, she wasn't done. Later that morning, while checking discharge protocols, Sarah overheard the attending doctor mention the man's prescriptions. 2 medications for inflammation and pain, both not covered by charity aid. Sarah didn't say a word. She waited until the hallway cleared, then walked down to the hospital pharmacy. "I'll cover it," she said softly, placing a $20 and a few crumpled bills on the counter. "But don't add my name. Just make sure he gets it." The pharmacist gave her a puzzled look, but nodded. Back upstairs, her coworker Lisa caught her in the middle of restocking gauze. "You okay? You've been running all night." Sarah gave a tired chuckle. "I'm fine. Just trying to do right by people." Lisa tilted her head. "You mean the guy in 4? No one even knows who he is." Sarah paused for a second, then said quietly, "If one day I end up like him, broken, alone with nothing but the clothes on my back, I hope someone would still see me as human. I hope someone would care enough to be kind." Lisa didn't respond. She just looked at Sarah, maybe seeing her differently for the first time. The shift ended as the sun began to rise. Sarah gathered her things, her body aching in every direction, but something in her heart felt lighter. She had no idea that someone had been watching all along, from behind a newspaper, behind a curtain, behind a carefully guarded secret. And he wasn't going to forget what he saw. Across the room from bed 4, half hidden behind a thin curtain and a clipboard of fake vitals, lay a man known to the hospital staff only as Mr. W. Hart. His chart read minor chest pain, observation only. He hadn't asked for much, just a pillow, a cup of water, and to be left alone. But Mr. W. Hart wasn't a real patient. Not exactly. William Hartman, one of the most discreet philanthropists in the country, had spent the last decade quietly funding non-profit hospitals across the Northeast. He rarely made public appearances, never put his name on wings or buildings, and almost never revealed his involvement. He preferred it that way. He believed that real change happened not in boardrooms, but in break rooms, at nurses' stations, in the trenches. That night, William was doing something he'd done a dozen times before, posing as a patient to observe how his donations were being used. He wanted to see how people were treated when no one thought anyone important was watching. He hadn't expected Sarah. From the moment she entered the ER, William noticed her. Not because of her appearance, though there was a quiet grace in the way she moved, but because of the way she looked at people. She didn't just see injuries. She saw humanity. He watched her kneel beside the homeless man, her voice low and steady, her hands careful and unhurried. He saw the way she tucked the blanket beneath his shoulders, how she cleaned his wounds without wrinkling her nose or flinching away from the dirt. He saw her walk to the break room and return with food, her own food, and how she left a handwritten note beneath a cup of milk, not knowing if he would ever read it. Later, William saw her speaking softly with the pharmacist, sliding money across the counter when no one else was looking. It wasn't just kindness. It was conviction. And it stunned him. In a system that often stripped people of their dignity, Sarah gave it back, without being asked, without expecting thanks. Lying in his bed, William found himself gripping the edge of the blanket, his throat tight. He'd met world leaders and CEOs, negotiated billion-dollar deals, sat in rooms with people who changed laws and rewrote futures. But none of them had moved him the way this exhausted young nurse had in a single night. He thought of the hospitals he'd helped build, the programs he'd funded, and wondered how many Sarahs had gone unseen, unsupported, underpaid. Not anymore. As dawn crept through the window blinds, William made a quiet decision. This wasn't going to be just another anonymous visit. Sarah had reminded him why he started all of this in the first place. She hadn't seen him, not really. Just another old man in another ER bed. But he had seen her. Every moment. Every small act of mercy. And now, it was his turn to give something back. 3 days later, Sarah was nearing the end of another grueling double shift when her supervisor approached her with an odd request. The medical director wants to see you in his office. Right now. Sarah blinked, confused. Did something happen? Is everything okay? Just head up. You're not in trouble, I promise. She wiped her hands on her scrubs, pulled her hair back into a neater ponytail, and took the elevator to the top floor. The administrative wing felt like a different universe, quiet, polished, far from the chaos she knew downstairs. She knocked lightly on the office door. A voice called out from inside. Come in. She stepped into the room and froze. There, seated in a tailored navy suit beside the hospital director's desk, was the elderly man from room 4. But he looked nothing like the frail, trembling figure she remembered. His posture was straight, his face freshly shaven, his eyes alert. The coat on his shoulders looked like it cost more than her entire paycheck. You're... He smiled, standing to shake her hand. William Hartman, he said. But you knew me as someone else the other night. Sarah glanced at the director, who simply gave her an encouraging nod and slipped quietly out of the room. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Are you with the board? Were you a patient? William gestured for her to sit. I was pretending to be a patient. It's something I do from time to time. I fund hospitals like this one, quietly. I prefer to observe how things really work, from the ground level. Sarah sat, unsure whether to feel honored or embarrassed. Her cheeks flushed. I didn't know. I just thought. You thought I was homeless. And you treated me like a human being anyway. William leaned forward, his tone warm but steady. You didn't rush me. You didn't look away. You gave me food from your own lunch. You paid for my medication. And you left a note that reminded me why I started doing all this in the first place. Sarah swallowed hard. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to say. I'm just doing my job, she murmured. William shook his head. No. You were doing much more than that. You were being the kind of person this world desperately needs. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope and a small folder. He placed them gently on the table in front of her. This is a full scholarship for the remainder of your advanced nursing program. And this," he tapped the envelope, "contains $50,000 to help you with your son's care, rent, whatever you need." Sarah's breath caught. Her hand trembled as she touched the edge of the folder. "Mr. Hartman, I don't know what to say." He smiled. "Say you'll keep being exactly who you are. Say you'll keep showing up. Because people like you. You change lives without even realizing it." He stood, offering his hand once more. "You treated me like a person, not a case. Now, I want to treat you like someone who deserves far more than she's been given." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she shook his hand. The world felt different, suddenly wider, brighter. For the first time in years, possibility didn't feel so far away. The envelope in Sarah's lap felt heavier than it should have, like it carried not just papers, but possibility. She turned it over in her hands, still not fully believing what had just happened. William Hartman, a man she had bathed and bandaged like any other patient, had just changed her life. And yet, he wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," he said, settling back into his chair. Sarah looked up, eyes still misted. "I don't think I can handle any more surprises tonight." He chuckled softly. "This one's not a surprise. It's a beginning." From a leather folder, he pulled out a single-page document and slid it across the desk. "Next spring, we're opening a new community health center in the Bronx, fully funded, fully staffed, but with a different philosophy. It's meant to serve low-income families, undocumented individuals, and patients who often fall through the cracks. No red tape. No judgment. Just care." Sarah leaned forward, scanning the page. It was a formal job offer. "Director of Patient Outreach and Care Coordination," she read aloud, disbelief in her voice. William nodded. "I've read your evaluations. I've spoken with the staff. You're not just competent, you're compassionate. And we need that. We need you. But I haven't even finished my degree. That's what the scholarship is for. Full tuition. Books too. And when you graduate, this position is yours, if you want it." Sarah sat back, her heart pounding. Her whole life, she had carried everyone else, her patients, her son, even her own dreams, like fragile glass in her hands. And now, someone was handing her something solid. Not a handout. A future. "And the $50,000? She asked quietly. "It's yours, no strings attached. Use it however you need, to pay for your son's medication, rent a better place, breathe for a change." Her throat tightened. She thought of Nathan's inhaler, nearly empty again. Of the eviction notice she'd tucked behind the microwave. Of the way she told her son that Santa would be a little late this year. William smiled gently. "You've given so much to people who had nothing to give back. Let this be your return." Sarah stood, slowly, still gripping the offer letter. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because in a room full of people who looked away, you looked closer. You saw a person where others saw a burden. And I think the world needs more people who see that way." Tears slid down her cheeks, unchecked. But they weren't tears of exhaustion, or fear, or helplessness. For the first time in a long while, they were tears of hope. She reached out her hand, and William shook it firmly. "Thank you," she said. "No, Miss Sarah," he replied. "Thank you." And in that quiet office, high above the city she had served for so long, a door opened. Not just for Sarah, but for every patient she would go on to help. Because now, she had everything she needed to build something better. And she would. 2 years later, the hallway of the new community health center in the Bronx echoed with the sounds of children laughing, phones ringing, and soft footsteps from nurses in scrubs. At the heart of it all stood Sarah, no longer the exhausted nurse scraping by in the shadows of a crowded ER, but now the head nurse of the very clinic she had once only dreamed of. She wore her new title with quiet pride. Not because it meant more money or more authority, but because it meant she could finally do things the way she had always believed they should be done. No bureaucracy. No judgment. Just care. Her office walls were lined not with degrees or awards, but with drawings from young patients, thank you notes from families, and a single framed photo of her and her son, Nathan, now 10, asthma under control, thriving. But Sarah's vision reached further than one building. A few months after starting her new role, she launched a non-profit foundation called Hope in Uniform, a scholarship program for single-parent nurses, struggling nursing students, and frontline healthcare workers on the brink of burnout. The name came from a phrase she used to tell herself during the darkest nights: hope doesn't need a cape. Sometimes, it just wears scrubs. The foundation started small, just enough to cover a semester's tuition for 3 nursing students. But then local news picked up her story. And then national outlets. Soon, Sarah found herself sitting across from journalists, morning show hosts, and even university deans, all asking the same question: why did you do it? And she always gave the same answer: because someone believed in me when I had nothing left to give. This is just my way of passing it on. Donations poured in. Nurses from across the country wrote letters, thanking her not just for the financial help, but for reminding them that what they did mattered. That they mattered. Sarah never let the attention change her. She still made her morning rounds. She still sat beside patients who had no visitors. She still remembered the night a stranger had seen her, and the night she chose kindness anyway. Outside the clinic, just beneath the carved wooden sign bearing the name Harper Heart Community Health Center, there was a bronze plaque. It bore no mention of donors or board members. Just a single line in soft, elegant script. Kindness doesn't require a high salary, only a big enough heart. Patients would stop to read it, some even taking photos. But the staff, especially the new nurses Sarah mentored, knew exactly where it came from. It was something she had said once, late at night, almost to herself, after paying for a stranger's prescription and walking back into the fluorescent hum of the ER. Now, it was the heartbeat of the clinic. And Sarah? She never stopped showing up, not because she had to, but because the world still needed people who looked closer, who chose compassion when no one was watching. In scrubs, in silence, and always, always with heart. In a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet ones, Sarah's story reminds us that the smallest acts of kindness can ripple farther than we ever imagine. She didn't have wealth or power, only compassion, and the courage to act on it. In helping a stranger with nothing to give in return, she changed the course of not just her life, but many others who would come after her. For older generations who have seen life's ups and downs, this story reaffirms something timeless. Dignity, empathy, and goodness still matter. It's never too late, and never too small, to choose kindness. Whether it's offering a warm meal, a listening ear, or a gentle word, we each carry the ability to restore faith in humanity. Sometimes, the person you help today becomes the very reason hope survives tomorrow. If Sarah's story makes you believe that kindness is still quietly spreading every day, leave a like to encourage the hearts that continue to give in silence. And if you also believe that compassion has the power to change lives, hit the subscribe button to join us on more journeys that touch the heart. Thank you for staying with us until the end. We'll see you again in the next chapter of kindness.